They are among the most beautiful animals on Earth, and also the most feared. They are among the most ancient animals, quintessential survivors whose fossil remains suggest that they have been on Earth for over 300 million years. Yet we know very little about them. They are sleek and graceful, efficient and resilient. They have a critical place in the natural order. They are the sharks.
This Audubon special is made possible by the people of GE. GE, from plastics to financial services, we bring good things to life.
As far as mankind is concerned, it has always been open season on sharks. Perhaps because they are large, free-roaming predators. Perhaps because they have the capability of, and once in a great while, the history of attacking man. Man has felt justified in slaughtering sharks by whatever means are at hand. Man's attitude has been, the only good shark is a dead shark. Many animals once slaughtered for commerce have developed constituencies. For instance, whales are protected or their taking is limited by quotas. The rhinoceros is widely protected. Wolves are no longer looked upon as devils. The great cats, once thought to pose terrible threats to man, are still hunted but also protected by law in many countries. Bats, toads, gorillas, many other creatures, and even snakes have their champions. But sharks have no such constituency, despite the fact that of the more than 250 species known to science, fewer than 24 have ever attacked man, and only 3 or 4 are still considered truly dangerous to man. The species range from the largest fish in the world, the whale shark, up to 40 feet long, to the tiny cigar shark that can fit into the palm of your hand. The cookie cutter shark, whose jaws extend like a scoop to bite out cookie-sized portions of flesh from their prey, which can include whales and dolphins. The thresher shark uses a tail half the length of its 10 to 20-foot body to stun its prey. While the mako, fastest of all sharks, may leap 20 feet into the air, perhaps to rid itself of parasites. There are exquisite sharks with bizarre skin patterns and emerald green eyes, like this chain dogfish. And to be sure, there are sharks that are formidable predators indeed. The great white, for example. And there are still more unknown species in deep water, like this unlikely shark named megamouth, accidentally discovered in 1976 when it swallowed a Navy sea anchor off the Hawaiian Islands. Scientists know very little about even the most common sharks. In the Bahamas, just 50 miles from Florida across the Gulf Stream, Dr. Samuel Gruber from the University of Miami heads a team of scientists studying lemon sharks, a common species in Florida and Bahama waters.
Well, this particular study is a very broad-based or fundamental investigation looking at the lemon shark as a model of the top predator in this particular ecosystem. It's very, very broad-based because there is not a lot known about some simple things like rates of digestion, rates of growth, and this is because they've been difficult to study both in the laboratory and field. The centerpiece of the study is something called bioenergetics, in which we determine the energetic inputs and outputs of the animal. It's like taking an automobile and finding out how much gasoline it needs to move so far and how efficiently that gasoline burns.
Lemon sharks mate and give birth in the shallow flats around the island of Bimini. The young remain in the shallows for 5 years, protected from predators by the mangrove shallows and the lagoon confines. So the area has a unique advantage for the study of this species. Using the airboat in the shallows of the lagoon, Dr. Gruber and assistant Bob Juriat search for adult sharks. Their darker bodies stand out against the white sand. When captured, the shark will be briefly immobilized while a blood sample is taken, body temperature recorded, and a number of measurements and analyses are carried out. Dr. Gruber believes it's important to learn as much as possible about lemon sharks in order to develop an intelligent means of assuring their survival. If there is a sensible, responsible way to exploit them for food and commerce, and he is not at all sure that there is, it's critical to know as much as possible about their reproductive and life cycles so that man doesn't inadvertently destroy the species.
Let's get ready with a Casey tag or Gruber tag. Okay, the Gruber number is 424. Casey number is A08953.
I'm ready faster.
Okay.
I
I hope too, because you don't get two chances. Put that sucker in his mouth. I would do it. Hold it, put it in his mouth. Let him hold it. He won't do anything but spit it out, though. That's it. Now we got him. Let him struggle a little bit. That's good. Now you got his head under control. You don't need to hold the thing. Now you've got the head bent up, so bring the pole to you a bit. That's it. That's it. That's it. Don't let him let it go now.
Oh, I'm getting mad, so he holds on.
That's it. He'll hold on to it. Tell me when you're on his.
Now.
Straighten him out now. I'm going to pull tight.
Yes.
137.5.
Many of the sharks in the lagoon have already been tagged. Dr. Gruber records the tag numbers for comparison with earlier data. The migratory patterns and range of travel can be determined when the tags are posted back by the fishermen, who may catch the shark thousands of miles away and many years from now. Other scientists elsewhere in the lagoon are preparing young lemon sharks for telemetering.
This is just a third of the phase that Dr. Gruber is using for his studies, looking at respiration, feeding, digestion, and home range. And we're going to tie that all in to see how much, as far as the size of the home range, can be related to how much it eats and how much energy is required to keep the animal moving. So we can relate that to how much space it uses during its path throughout the lagoon.
The telemetering device is surgically inserted into the visceral cavity of the shark, which causes the shark neither harm nor discomfort, and the wound is sutured closed.
By having the monitor.
The young shark is revived by walking it, which washes oxygen-bearing salt water over its gill plates. Once the scientist decides the shark can make it on its own, he releases the animal, none the worse for wear.
Take the Apple IIc, hook up the serial interface, and extract the data. And then we take the data, it's stored on disk, print that out, and then we can analyze each shark that has a transmitter in it and look where it's been during that month so we can get an estimate of the size of the home range of the animal. We want to look to see if the animals themselves do have an activity space, and if the activity space is confined to this 2.5 square kilometer lagoon, because we believe that as the animal grows or gets larger, the size of the activity space that it uses will increase proportionally to the size of the animal.
The hydrophone receiver is placed on the sandy bottom, where it will remain for a month before the data are collected. Dr. Adrianus Kalmin has been conducting experiments on the flats to demonstrate that all the elasmobranchs, the sharks, skates, and rays, navigate by using the Earth's magnetic field and the electric fields caused by currents. His equipment alters the natural electromagnetic field to see if a pair of large rays will change direction accordingly.
All right, hold it. 59, go.
There's due north.
I found that they have a certain sensory system, that they have potentially the capability of using the electric fields in the ocean to orient to and to determine their drift. And on the other side, that they have the Earth's magnetic field to orient to sense their compass directions.
There are two rays out here at about 45 meters. between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock on the stakes. They're headed generally to the southwest. They're coming on across. Add, apply some power.
Current is going on,
Okay,
slowly increasing, halfway, and the
okay.
current is
They're
full.
making a left turn. They're heading off towards the south. They're at about the 6 o'clock stake. They're at about 30 meters. They're heading on out. Take the current off, Ed.
Okay, current goes off slowly now.
Current goes off. They're making a right turn, heading off to the west.
As soon as the equipment is turned off, the rays resume their course following the natural magnetic field. Conclusive proof that elasmobranchs navigate electromagnetically, and an answer to the question of why sharks often return all their lives to the same grounds. Meanwhile, Dr. Gruber has received an urgent summons to one of the team's long lines, a series of baited hooks that capture and restrain sharks so they can be tagged and studied. The lines are checked twice every day, and the sharks are released unharmed after data has been gathered. The radio report tells Dr. Gruber that the line has hooked a pregnant female, which might have to be assisted in giving birth.
Looks like we got an 8.5 to 9 foot lemon underneath the boat down here, and she's pretty fat.
How long's it been on the line, do you figure?
She's been down here about 3 to 4 hours now.
Yeah, I think that might be a stressed female. You're going to have to go down there and check it out. If it is really pregnant, you're going to have to help it deliver. Otherwise, it'll die from the stress, and we want that animal.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead then.
In this rare scene, the diver briefly becomes obstetrician. He reaches far into the birth canal of the mother shark, feels for the tail of the pup, and gently draws it out tail first. Young were delivered in this way. The mother would later be measured, tagged, and released, appearing neither grateful nor resentful about the strange encounter with animals from another world. In seconds, the young swim away, breaking their umbilical connection as they go. With all sharks, there is no further maternal association with the young after they are born.
Fully 200 million years before the first human walked on this earth, sharks and their allies had developed a reproductive method which was exactly parallel to that seen in humans. In other words, sharks have internal fertilization, they become pregnant. These type of sharks, one family, actually has a maternal-fetal connection. That maternal-fetal connection passes material from the mother's bloodstream into the offspring grow inside the mother. It's a perfect parallel to the mammals. You have an animal that barely reproduces itself, and if you begin to take the mature adults, it's almost like digging gold out of a mine in the sense that you cannot get any more young. You can't get 50,000 young anymore. You can get 10 or 12, which we've discovered with the lemon shark, every other year. That's called low fecundity and low reproductive output, and is a very significant factor in the overexploitation of sharks. There are some fisheries biologists that believe it is impossible to rationally exploit shark stocks.
Off the coast of North Carolina, another species of shark is studied by scientist Grant Gilmore. This species, the sand tiger, is coming under intense pressure by commercial fishermen. The Carolina banks are a pupping and breeding area. Dr. Gilmore is researching the reproductive cycle of the sand tiger to better control the harvest of that species as the commercial pressure increases. Cameras loaded, the divers drop overboard. They descend quickly to the 100-foot bottom where the sand tiger sharks patrol. Gilmore believes that this species is ideal for introducing sport divers to the entire realm of sharks.
Well, I think once he'd come in contact with the sand tiger, he would probably relish the experience, because here he has the opportunity to be with a very large animal, and not in an aggressive manner, just in a curious manner. The shark's curious, you're curious, and your chances of violence in the situation is minimal. I think this is a perfect time to be with a large predator and gain some respect for him at the same time. There haven't been any recorded attacks by sand tigers on sport divers, and this shark is considered one of the unaggressive species. Even though it might be quite large and look quite sinister, it's not aggressive at all, and I think diving with an animal like this is a rare opportunity. Several aspects of the biology of sharks which make them incompatible with fisheries. First of all, they reproduce very few young, typically, over a fairly long time. When they mature, it's usually late in life. So if you're going to grow slowly, if you're going to reproduce slowly, fishery could easily take more of these individuals out than they can reproduce and replace individuals within the schools or wherever you might find the sharks. However, this species now, the sand tiger, is also being fished, and it's very possible that the sand tiger shark might decline to the point that our studies will not be viable any longer for this species also, so we're quite concerned about that.
At the Mote Marine Laboratory in Florida, William Mote, Kumar Mahadevan, and the Dean of American Shark Scientists, Dr. Perry Gilbert, focus much of the lab's research on sharks.
Here at the Mote Marine Laboratory, we have had teams from the National Institutes of Health working using sharks as their experimental model in biomedical research. They've been interested in such things as the blood-brain barrier, why certain drugs get through and others do not, from the bloodstream to the brain. And very recently, we have been working on cataract formation. Dr. Ziegman of the University of Rochester works here at our lab regularly every January. And he has come to understand more about cataract in man by studying cataract formation in sharks. And finally, we have in our laboratory, as a senior scientist, Dr. Carl Luer, who is working with sharks as an experimental animal in his cancer program.
One of the unique aspects of sharks is that they have a skeleton composed entirely of cartilage. Cartilage is naturally an avascular tissue. By this I mean that it is able to resist the penetration of blood vessels into this tissue. One of the very important aspects of the development of a solid tumor is that they are able to recruit their own blood supply to them as they develop. When they do this, they are able then to outcompete the normal cells around them by having this increased amount of nutrients, and they grow to become the problem that we know cancer is. As is often the case, basic research can be a time-consuming and laborious task. From a pound of shark cartilage, and after several months of research, only a few drops of material can be obtained for final testing. It is hoped that in the future, working with scientists who are familiar with tumor processes, the material may be able to be directed to an area surrounding a developing tumor, be able to block the spread of blood vessels to this area, and be able to control the growth of the neoplastic tissue.
The Mote Marine Lab also has a science center, where scientist Susan Holderman works with children on the premise that an important element in the survival of sharks will be the education of a new generation to appreciate their wonder.
Well, they grow to about 14 feet. That's pretty big. That's the length of this aquarium. That's quite large. But they eat these little crustaceans and things off of the bottom.
Do they have names?
We haven't really given them names, although the larger one we call nibbles. And we're using sharks for all kinds of research over in our laboratory. Did you know that?
No.
You know that we're using sharks to learn about cancer? Did you know that sharks don't get cancer? No. That's interesting, isn't it? We have a fellow that's studying them to find out why they don't get cancer so that we can apply that to humans. You see this one back here?
Yeah.
How old do you think that shark is?
The small one or the big one?
The big one.
Maybe about a year.
No. It's about a year. Very good. That's right.
This old footage shows Dr. Gilbert's early experiments with a repellent substance that was issued to sailors and flyers during World War II. The substance was called shark chaser and was thought to be repugnant to the shark's sense of smell. In this classic experiment, by temporarily blindfolding the shark, Dr. Gilbert proved that it was the black dye that repelled the shark. It was a visual repellent and ineffective as soon as it dissipated. Today, there is little interest in repellents and less need for them. But 40 years ago, the government supported a number of programs. The memory of marine disasters during the war was still fresh. Experiments abounded, many of them bizarre. There was a curtain of bubbles, which the sharks seemed to like. A shark dart, which blew CO2 into the animal. It did the job, but was gruesomely fatal. Even a sticker with a parachute on the end, designed to discombobulate and slow the shark down. Most practical was the Scott Johnson bag. It could hold several men, and by surrounding the swimmers, it kept all attractive scents and sights away from the shark. It was standard equipment on overseas military aircraft for many years. More recently, an anti-shark bite suit has been manufactured out of chainmail. It is made by Jeremiah Sullivan.
As an effort to provide a more realistic environment in which to study the human-shark interaction, which is my special interest. There will never be a large popular demand for this product because of its very highly specialized uses. There are only people that are in the research industry, film teams, and so on that would ever find themselves in a circumstance such as the ones that we create in conducting our tests that would ever really find them very useful, certainly worth the expense involved.
The suit, which weighs about 15 pounds, is made of thousands of steel links. It is used primarily by scientists and cameramen who must work in close proximity to agitated sharks. The design was initiated by Australia's renowned underwater photographers, Ron and Valerie Taylor. These sharks have been baited and stimulated, provoked really, and there is precious little reason for a sport diver ever to find himself in a circumstance like this. Even in the middle of a feeding frenzy, the sharks have no inclination to attack the diver. The chainmail suit is an extra precaution against an unforeseeable accident. As knowledge and understanding have replaced fear of sharks, fewer and fewer scientists continue to experiment with repellents. One who does is Dr. Don Nelson of the University of California at Long Beach. Dr. Nelson has created a chemical surfactant, something like a detergent, which can be squirted at a shark to discourage it.
Nowadays, as more and more people are entering the ocean, we find that many of them wish to actually see sharks. And these people need to know, one, just what species are dangerous, and number two, what can be done to protect themselves in these situations, particularly without harming or killing the shark, because people are coming to view sharks as a natural resource to be appreciated rather than killed, much like lions in the Serengeti or bears in Alaska.
Dr. Nelson enters the water with his assistant, Rocky Strong. The divers swim to the protective cage, which will allow them to conduct their experiments without constantly watching their backs. To draw sharks to the cage, Rocky spreads chum, bits of savory fish. The first visitor is a mako, unmistakable, sleek, fast, and aggressive. A blue shark homes in on the chum, a good sign, for blues often travel in schools. Before testing the repellent, Dr. Nelson will do his part in an ongoing tagging program. The cage is a prudent precaution when working in open ocean. The shark will carry that tag until caught, perhaps many years and thousands of miles hence. A mako shark cruises by. its skin like burnished steel. It does not approach the cage close enough for tagging. Dr. Nelson carries the surfactant in a tank on his back. He pumps some of the chemical into the applicator and prepares to meet the sharks. The repellent, chemically based on a natural fish secretion first noticed in the Red Sea by Dr. Eugenie Clark, is effective. The mechanics required for its application are so cumbersome that a practical use of the repellent may never be achieved. Don Nelson himself confirms the limited need for any repellent at all.
I think the ethic is shifting as to how people view sharks nowadays. More and more divers feel that a shark is something to be seen, appreciated, observed, and photographed, rather than an animal to be captured, killed, and eaten. Of course, as we now view whales and dolphins in that regard. And even if you had to put an economic value on a shark on a given reef, I think you could probably add up more dollars in terms of people willing to pay to go and see and appreciate it than the dollar value of killing and selling that fish at so many cents per pound.
No scientist has done more to sensitize human beings to the wonder of sharks than Dr. Eugenie Clark of the University of Maryland. More than 60 years old, the legendary Shark Lady still rides whale sharks and dives all over the world.
You know how much enjoyment people get out of sharks. Some people like fact and fiction. They enjoy hearing about sharks because they're so fascinating. They enjoy watching them. They also like to use them as Frankenstein's and Dracula's, the horror stories, which something, the childlike quality of us. We all enjoy horror stories. And the movie Jaws, based on a great best-selling book. All this, we enjoy reading about them, seeing them in movies. People have made millions of dollars exploiting the shark. But the shark really has a lot of valuable things to give us. They're just learning that the cartilage of shark can be used in making a temporary skin after severe burns. It's also known that there's a substance in the cartilage that is anti-carcinogen, helps to ward off cancer. And they're studying that at the Mote Marine Laboratory. There are many kinds of substances found in the livers of sharks that have been investigated for medical science. Emery Christoph and I have been observing the large numbers of sharks in deep water from 1,000 to over 3,000 feet. The bottom is just amazing once you bait it in and see how many sharks will come into the area. Just tons of shark meat. And we wonder where they get the food that they need to sustain such a big body. But actually, I think probably deep sea sharks, like shallow water sharks, don't eat regularly. They go days, weeks, maybe months without a good meal, just picking off little things, and then suddenly they'll find a great big carcass of something or some dying whale, and then they gorge themselves, and that will carry them on. They store it in those huge livers. Do we really need a shark repellent? That's the thing. Do we need to be going around with something on our bodies to protect us from sharks? It's more of a psychological crutch. Those of us who dive, and there are many, many people now that scuba dive and love to dive where there's sharks around, if we behave in their environment, they're not a threat to us. And we shouldn't worry about things like that. Going around spearing a fish or doing something in the water with explosives might attract a shark. But for the ordinary diver, they don't need a shark repellent. You can go diving with hundreds of hammerhead sharks in the water. And we know that it's something that tourist divers like to do now. They're disappointed if they go in the water and they don't see a shark.
The Sea of Cortez, which separates Baja California from the Mexican mainland, has become a kind of mecca for scientists dedicated to the study of hammerhead sharks. The sea is calm and teeming with life. The expedition ship Ambar 3 approaches one of the many underwater pinnacles in the sea. In prehistory, Baja California was connected to the mainland. Then some geological cataclysm, probably a monstrous earthquake, tore it asunder like the tail of a ripping shirt, and the Sea of Cortez was born. The land around the sea is also a living laboratory for geologists, for it still bears the scars of its creation. One of the leading researchers in the field of hammerheads is Dr. Peter Klimley of the Scripps Institute of Oceanography.
80 feet on the large pinnacle, and we're going to move northerly away from the pinnacle into deeper water where the sharks usually are grouped. They're very site-specific. We usually encounter them just north of this larger pinnacle, which varies in depth from 65 to 80 feet.
The hammerheads are easily disturbed. For instance, the scuba bubbles particularly frighten them. However, a pre-diver can dive down into the group and remain there with sharks less than 3 feet away and observe them for prolonged periods of time. And this is how we've attached our telemetry devices to study their orientational abilities and videotaped their behaviors for analysis. However, if they're at depths of 100 to 120 feet, then we must use scuba diving. And scuba diving is difficult in the sense that it doesn't allow us to get close enough and remain with the sharks for prolonged periods of time.
Dr. Klimley and photographer Howard Hall decide to approach the hammerheads in a small boat. They will free dive, no scuba gear, holding their breaths in hopes of not spooking the sharks. Both divers are capable of holding their breaths for more than a minute and a half. No great feat while resting on the surface, but quite an accomplishment while they consume oxygen by swimming and carrying bulky cameras. And before they can take a single picture, they have to find the sharks. A heavy plankton bloom has reduced the visibility, and evidently the sharks are cruising in the deep, more than 130 feet down.
We're not seeing them.
No, they're way down there. They're way down there.
That stratum of zooplankton at about 15 to 20 meters is a blanket that's preventing us from actually seeing.
They got to be 150 feet.
And they're considerably deeper than that, so.
Well, Pam, you want to take this thing? Let's try someplace else.
Yeah.
Dr. Klimley resorts to using sonar to find the schools of sharks, the same technology modern fishermen use to locate their catches.
There'll be a bait fish, and then the sharks are a little seaward of it outside, and so you have an individual target here, one there, one there, one there, and one here. This is probably an individual apart from the group. This may be a group of.
On this dive, Dr. Klimley will take a small video camera mounted in an underwater housing. Increasingly, the video unit is the scientist's tool for recording his observations. The divers will use scuba gear this time. The sharks are deep, the visibility is poor. Breath-hold diving would be impractical and exhausting. Just as an island in the open sea will attract mariners as a source of life and possible shelter, a place where the ocean bottom extends upwards as a submarine pinnacle becomes the matrix of a rich marine ecosystem. In the Sea of Cortez, the schooling hammerheads are often found on the perimeter of these pinnacles. The divers cruise the top of the pinnacle, then move into deeper water. There they are, on the edge of the blue gloom. Outriders at first, then more and more. Dr. Klimley has concluded that hammerheads communicate by using body language, shaking their heads, arching their backs. The sharks don't seem to feed here. Perhaps these gatherings are some sort of pre-mating ritual, and the divers hope to get a rare glimpse of mating behavior. They move deeper still. And down in the depths below 100 feet, they find a magical garden. Deep water gorgonia and sponges that normally thrive only in shallow water. The water is clearer down here, for they have left the layer of plankton bloom far above. There at last they have one clear look at the mysterious congregation. In the taxing world of underwater research, every day is not a bonanza, every shot not necessarily a score.
Sharks in the past have been considered to be simple, primitive feeding machines. I have found in my studies that they possess a wonderful repertoire of social behavior and communicatory patterns. Also, they possess the remarkable ability to make straight line orientations away and back to their home sites. And these abilities, I think, have contributed greatly to there being an evolutionary success.
Today, sport divers come from all over the world to swim with the schooling hammerheads. The dive boat Don Jose delivers a dive tour group to another seamount.
So essentially, this isn't a dangerous activity. Women aren't about to be devoured. So, if our luck is good, we can all see them today. We'll be able to make a few dives and have some fun. What do you think about getting in the water, cooling off some?
Yeah.
All right.
Really?
Let's go.
All right, Patty, you ready? Yeah.
Let's go bite some sharks.
Underwater mountains, called seamounts, rise from the abyssal depths to within 50 or 100 feet of the surface. Around the seamount congregates the entire food chain. The divers swim through coral canyons. A pufferfish, not puffed right now, for it senses no danger. A cloud of spawning wrasse. A turtle, a real veteran, encrusted with barnacles. Heralding the nearness of sharks, schools of jacks appear. The water is 82 degrees Fahrenheit and so rich in plankton that the visibility is poor. The schools of hammerheads, as they appear, seem to be legions of ghosts patrolling the blue mist. No one knows why hammerheads school in such numbers. You may approach just so close before they retreat into the gloom. A rare encounter with a shy and elusive sailfish. Because the surface water is so warm, the sharks seek the cool depths. The divers must also go deep to 120 feet. Finally, they can look up and see a sight that will linger forever in their memories.
When I got down there and you see them, they're just so beautiful that all the fear goes away and you just try to get a little bit closer and a little bit closer to them.
You're brought up to fear sharks because of the paper or whatever, and everybody else says, oh, it's dangerous or whatever. First time Patty and I saw them up at Animas, they were gorgeous, just beautiful animals with the the sun shining on their backs and going between the pinnacles.
I felt like I was seeing something that most people will never see in a lifetime. There was no fear, which surprised me.
He's pretty active, this one.
Thank you.
Chopped it right through, look at that. Clean as a whistle. Hey?
Hey, got him!
Okay, now you guys, are you ready to get in the cage?
As long as no one gets in my way, it's fine.
Sport divers willing to pay thousands of dollars and travel halfway around the world to South Australia can meet the most formidable predator of all, the great white shark.
Well, enough for the practice run, huh?
All right.
Feeding on baits hung over the side of the boat, a white shark puts on a display of bite dynamics that awes the divers. You may see the jaw extend almost to the point of dislocation and the gums that rotate the teeth into bite position. It's not hard to think of a 19th century description of white sharks as, quote, the most formidable of all the inhabitants of the sea, for in none besides are the powers of inflicting injury so equally combined with the eagerness to accomplish it. We now know, however, that white sharks are much more victim than villain. Still, as divers go into the cage, they wonder.
Have you spat in your mask?
I have.
And for some, the excitement is overwhelming.
Oh! Now what you've got to do is when you jump in here, put your arms together.
The divers wait. Their unanimous thought is that the cage seems mighty flimsy. Then out of the gloom, serene, unchallengeable, confident in its supremacy, glides the magnificent predator.
She's so excited she forgot her camera.
Great whites are not the only sharks that patrol the chilly waters of South Australia. One day, the divers are paid an unusual visit by a pack of bronze whalers, small, fast, aggressive sharks that compete vigorously with one another for food. Baits are drifted out past the cages. The shark's easy patrolling is replaced with a violent, aggressive feeding pattern at point of contact with the bait. Once the bait is devoured, the predators return to their passive, watchful promenade. Seasoned, shark-experienced divers in the group sense a margin of safety in an open encounter with these sharks during quiet patrol periods. One by one, the guests experience that thrill. Divers find that the excitement of the encounter under experienced supervision is worth the calculated risk. This is not, repeat, not recommended for weekend divers.
Amazing creature.
When you get 2 or 3 down here and they start fighting over different baits and...
That was incredible. Truly incredible.
Yeah.
How big was it?
Well, I reckon it was about 11 feet long.
30 or 40 of them. We're all out of the cage, taking pictures of them.
He's so awesome.
Yeah.
Just to go by, but you feel like he's not gonna mess with you. He's going for the bait. We were all backing up just a little bit.
The remote and barren Neptune Islands off South Australia are shared by one lighthouse keeper and his family, thousands of terns, gannets, gulls, and fur seals. It is summer down under. Their spring and summer from October through March is a time for mating and birth. For the seabirds, eggs are laid and hatched. Nestlings waddle forth under the rocky shore until their wings may lift them into the wide world. Seal pups are born. They learn to swim and quickly learn caution, for the white shark, by primordial instinct, arrives here at the same time for easy and abundant feeding. Here survives an industry of hardy souls who gather succulent abalone. In years past, the ab divers and white sharks have been implacable enemies, for the theory is that the divers in their black wetsuits look very much like seals, a prime food source for white sharks. But the divers have learned to coexist with the sharks by working out of special, self-propelled protective cages that permit them to work safely and without fear. The cage is connected to the surface by hoses. The motor is activated by compressed air. The marine life in the Neptunes is exquisite, exotic, and wonderfully varied. A sea perch, the zebrafish, a wobbegong shark, the bougainville anglerfish, the octopus whose camouflage doesn't always save him from becoming a meal for the bottom sharks like the wobbegong. And most spectacular of all, the sea dragon, one of the seahorse family. And always about you, if you dive in these waters, the playful, blithesome, delightful, and infinitely graceful fur seals. Traditionally, ab divers have killed white sharks whenever they could. Now they can work without killing or being killed. Here is one solution for those who believe that the onus is on man to adapt to hostile, different environments without altering those environments. Rodney Fox, himself the survivor of a near-fatal white shark attack years ago during his spearfishing days, is now an ardent conservationist.
I think you would be surprised at the numbers that are here. In the whole of South Australia, I have estimated that there may only be 45 or 50. And we are privileged, really, to have them still alive in our age. And what I'm frightened of is that they'll be wiped out before we really understand them. They really don't know how many young they have, what their territories are, what their true role in ecology is. And there's an absolute terrific opportunity to study these in the next few years. But unless it's in the next few years, they'll be totally wiped out and it won't be feasible to run an expedition. I find that the shark attacks, and having studied quite a few now, that they don't really attack man and aren't man-eaters, but perhaps make a crazy mistake or a test bite every now and again.
Ron and Valerie Taylor, Australia's celebrated underwater photographers, are other champions of the white shark. In this extraordinary scene, filmed years ago, Ron and Val come upon an enormous white shark fouled in fishing lines. They worked to release it, and they saved its life.
For the last 10 years, when I've been working with many film companies and marine biologists from around the world, I hoped that we would find amongst them a champion that would perhaps come out here and work on the cause of the great white shark, because I have a feeling that they will be wiped out before their really true role in the seas is known.
Ron and Val still dive all over the world. They are concerned about the survival of several species of sharks and were a prime force in the creation of a preserve in Australia for one species, the grey nurse shark. Val speaks about that animal.
Amazing ability to hover in the water, and they would do this for hours on end in large groups in what we call shark gutters, and we call them shark gutters today as well.
Yeah, they have the ability to hold gas in their stomach, and we first noticed this when we used to kill them with a spear, that they would suddenly belch a large mouthful of air, and we couldn't figure out where it came from. And then we realized that they were using this gas to neutralize their buoyancy. And it's quite unique in the shark species, and we can find them in these shark gutters or shark caves, and they're just hovering virtually motionless off the bottom. They never actually lay on the bottom like some other sharks will. They can actually hover motionless in mid-water. And it's very easy to swim very close to them, take photographs, and occasionally we can even touch them.
Yes,
and
I met one the other day, remember?
Yeah.
And I had my hand on her head. And,
yeah.
She was really nice.
So it's a very good thing now that we were able to eventually convince the general public and the fisheries department that the sharks were harmless to man, and they are now protected. And fortunately, they're coming back in large numbers. When we first started venturing into the ocean in the early 50s, we had a fear of sharks, and it was a fear of the unknown. We just
didn't know how the sharks would react. The fishermen and other people would say we're crazy to go spearfishing in the ocean, but after a couple of years we realized that the sharks really weren't dangerous at all. And once we started to identify the different species, well, then it became quite fun to dive with the so-called man-eaters of the sea.
As for the reputation sharks have as voracious man-eaters, consider these big wobbegongs who look like frightened puppies trying to hide in a hole. By taking prudent precautions, Ron and Val know they can film any sharks anywhere at any time. They have filmed the feeding frenzy of gray reef sharks and remained unmolested in the middle of the action.
There's another shark that really needs protection, perhaps more than the grey nurse, and that's the great white. It's never been a common shark, and now it's even rarer than ever. And it's a very important shark. It's the end of the food chain. It's the biggest fish or shark that's dangerous in the ocean, the biggest predator, and it does, on occasions, attack man. But that's no reason to slaughter them the way they do. I mean, lions and tigers attack people, and yet they're protected. Other animals attack people, and they're protected. Dogs attack people, and they're protected. But this shark seems to bring out something in men that is really horrible, the killing lust. Let's go out and get them, let's kill them, let's tear them apart. And I've seen it, and it's a frightening thing. And the shark suffers for it. And I am really afraid that one day there will be no more great whites.
Ron and Val are not alone in their conservation attitude. The Marine Conservation Society of Great Britain is pushing for a moratorium on the hunting of the basking shark, second only to the whale shark in size. Like the whale shark, this harmless species feeds on plankton. They grow to 30 feet in length, and the livers of these gentle giants can produce 80 to 200 gallons of oil, once an important energy source. 35 years ago, nearly 2,000 a year were harpooned or caught in nets. 10 years later, the catch was less than 250. Their slow rate of reproduction and growth makes the basking shark vulnerable to the industry that lives off them. Shark fishing tournaments are popular on the Atlantic coast of the United States. There are now over 50 such tournaments each year. Sport fishing currently accounts for 3 times more sharks than does commercial fishing each year on the Atlantic coast. At the same time, under the leadership of marine fisheries scientist Jack Casey, the tournaments no longer bring in thousands of sharks of all sizes and species for points. Over 2/3 are released and many are tagged, so that the tournaments have become a constructive force in the tagging program. In this tournament at Bay Shore, Long Island, New York, only 25 adult sharks were brought in for contest points, and many of those were later sent to market for food. Jack Casey takes tag information from a fisherman. Sharks tagged off Long Island have crossed the Atlantic to Portugal before their tags were recovered.
Location was Loran number, Loran C 26368 43534. Okay, well, it's approximately a 6-foot blue shark.
Commercial fishing for sharks has been and still is unregulated. Its history is one of brief economic success, followed by collapse as stocks have been depleted beyond a point of profit, as other predators at the top of the food chain are depleted. And increasing fishing pressure has caused this to happen with the giant bluefin tuna and the swordfish. Sharks will inevitably be targeted for increased commercial harvest. Many species of shark provide excellent restaurant fare. Much of the Western world is just becoming aware of that. By last count, the worldwide catch of sharks in 1 year was 1.3 billion pounds. Great piles of shark carcasses like these in fishing ports of the world leave no question of who preys on whom in the man-shark relationship. To catch a swordfish or perhaps a thresher shark, a species much favored for human consumption, other species of sharks and their cousins, the rays, are caught, strangled in the nets, and then discarded. The animal that may one day contribute to the arrest of cancer in man, the animal that today provides an ingredient for artificial skin for human burn victims, an animal of physical grace and beauty, an animal that today is not even saved for fertilizer by many fishermen. Jack Casey, Sam Gruber, Grant Gilmore, and many other marine scientists are concerned. They hope, through a better understanding of the shark's life cycle, to prudently manage a valuable resource before that resource is endangered. Scientist Paul Ehrlich said, "Few problems are less recognized but more important than the accelerating disappearance of Earth's biological resources. In pushing other species to extinction, humanity is busily sawing off the limb on which it is perched."
This Audubon special is made possible by the people of GE. GE, from aircraft engines to appliances, we bring good things to life.